Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host Anthony Faso. We just finished up our interview with Beth Walker, the founder of the Center for College Solutions and author of Never Pay Retail for College. Anthony, how good was that, and what is a takeaway or two that you had?
Beth was really good. Not only was she knowledgeable and a good interview, but she had some great nuggets. And I think the overall takeaway is the importance of doing planning for something such a big expense like this, and that there are ways that even if you are a high income individual, that there are ways to lower the cost of what you're going to spend. And one way she talked about is picking the right school. You know, she mentioned a lot of schools are trying to have some diversity. So particularly, she mentioned smart boys.
Yeah.
Right. That there's more girls going to college. So some schools they're trying to be 50-50. So maybe if they're looking for boys that they may be more apt to get financial aid than maybe a girl who has a higher GPA. What were some of the takeaways you had, Cam?
Man, she had 4 or 5 just really good quotes or kind of phrasing on things that she used. And the one that I wrote down was finance their future, fund yours. And she gave us that in response to the way that parents, or the way that she coaches parents in approaching how they plan for college and retirement. Oftentimes, Anthony, I think you said this in the recording, but oftentimes you meet with somebody, a parent, and you've seen that they have given everything they have to the college expenses of their child, and oftentimes they end up with nothing at the end. And so putting it in perspective early on is a tremendous asset and insight for somebody that is planning. And then I love the way that she kind of screamed at us that she is not a fan of 529 plans. Mm-hmm. I think that that's probably the extent of most people's planning for college a lot of times. And what she refers to it as is as a single purpose dollar. And what we're really looking for or striving for is a multi-purpose dollar. I love the way that she explained it. And so, man, you guys are really going to enjoy this episode. Beth, I got to say, we are excited to have you on today. Let's kind of start with your background, and then we'll dive into college planning. So share with our listeners a little bit about your background and how you got started in college planning.
Well, thank you, number one, for having me. And I'd love to share that. I call myself a mom on a mission. I come to the table.
Anthony.
I come to the table with the mind of a financial planner, but the heart of a mother. So from a background perspective, I worked in corporate America for a long time and realized that just wasn't going to be my long-term path. And on one of my consulting trips, cross-country airplane ride, I was reading The Millionaire Next Door, which really prompted me to investigate getting into the financial advice business. It just resonated with me because I realized that I work with a lot of really smart people that just didn't have the time or the interest in managing personal finances. And that always intrigued me. I grew up watching Louis Rukeyser with my dad. And so I pivoted into a new career path thinking I would be working with corporate executives because that's what I was familiar with. But then I had a baby. And when my son Mac was born and I was home recovering from a cesarean section, I started doing that geeky financial planner thing and thinking, let's forecast what it's going to cost to put this little guy through college. And I was blown away in a not so positive way.
That usually ends up in tears.
And I thought to myself, what? This is crazy. There's got to be a better way to do this. And it kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of college planning. And I went to conferences and I got certifications and designations. And I learned about the financial aid system and cash flow. And where I came out with all of that is, wow, this got really expensive really fast. Nothing that our parents went through looked like what we were going to go through.
Yeah.
So we were literally dealing with a very different purchase decision. And from a consumer mindset, college is my hypothesis on this is it's the most emotional purchase parents make. They talk about getting you in the car to feel how the car handles and the smell of the leather because it's an emotional purchase. Well, that doesn't even compare to putting your kids through school, launching them in life, wanting them to learn how to become the best version of themselves. We lose our consumer mindset as parents when we're talking about our kids going to college. And so it's totally irrational. You put that in combination with the way the costs have accelerated, and you've just got a disaster. So as a financial planner with someone, my young son, who I wanted to make sure he had every opportunity available to him without derailing our own personal retirement plan, I realized what a challenge parents were faced with, and the complexities and the confusion and the inability, frankly, of our education system to keep up with all of that. I mean, one of the things when I was researching to write the book, Never Pay Retail for College, I found out that guidance counselors don't have a continuing education requirement. Now, if I teach English, if I teach math, if I teach Spanish, I have a continuing education requirement. But if I'm a guidance counselor, it's not required. And the rate of change with regard to costs, complexities, confusion, the financial aid system, it's a lot to keep up with. So I got into this like the traditional financial planner and only wanted to deal with the parents. We just have to talk about what assets, what kind of savings plan, should I put it in a 529 plan? How's this going to impact your ability to retire on time? And the thing that I discovered was that is not the way to go about it. And that's what prompted me writing the book. It is done correctly, it is a student-centric, multi-year project plan that requires 3 critical pillars. You need the financial fit. There's no question about it. But ironically, that comes at the end. Academic fit, meaning it's a good environment in terms of the student's ability to learn, style of learning, the majors that are important to that student have to fit. Social emotional fit. They have to be able to find their tribe. They have to be in a learning environment that plays to their strengths. That is so important. I talk about the 12 critical components in the book of an effective project plan.
Yeah.
And I kind of break that up because I did this for my own brain. Well, there's 4 critical components that the student has to pay attention to. There's 4 that the parents have to pay attention to. And then there's 4 where they overlap and have to collaborate. Well, most financial people don't want to deal with that. And it's a team sport, I think. You've got to have independent education consultants and career and major coaches. You've got to have people that can help you solve the problem for the family, finding the right school for the right price, plain and simple. So that's how I kind of got into it.
Awesome. And I'm hoping we can take a minute and maybe dive into that 12 kind of step outline that you have, because we were talking beforehand, you and I have met quite a while ago. And one of the things that really stuck out to me in the conversation that we had was just the timeline that you have when somebody should be approaching college and college planning to make this thing successful. And so I'm hoping we can maybe start there as far as the timeline. When should somebody really get started and get active? And then also that student-centric piece. I want to come back to that. As you said, hey, this should be kind of more about the student. So when should somebody get started here, Beth?
It's their senior year of high school, right?
Sadly, that's way too many of the people we end up serving.
Yeah.
I used to joke that I should start hanging out in labor and delivery rooms at the hospital. Because, just from a cash flow perspective, wrapping your mind around paying for college would be great if we started when they're born, but that's just not how we work as human beings. Okay. In fact, once you understand that college is a major capital purchase, which we define as anything you can't pay for fully out of monthly cash flow, okay? And in the past, that's been cars and houses, but college is at that level. You know, it's an expensive thing and often involves financing. So if we had our perfect world, we would really start honing in on this project at the end of the sophomore year of high school. Okay.
Into sophomore.
That doesn't mean I'm not setting some money aside or figuring out, but honestly, I think new parents are overwhelmed with newborns. Then they get, you know, off into grade school and middle school and new jobs. And it's just, there's a lot, you know, we've got sports, we've got orthodontia, we've got a lot of competing priorities when we have kids in the household. When it really starts to resonate is when these kids get into high school. And in a perfect world, if we could have this student-centric planning process, we'd begin working with the kids at the end of the sophomore year of high school. The financial piece, we could start literally when they're born. Unfortunately, it's usually not on the radar of the parents that early. With the students, we're trying to understand, what are you interested in? What kinds of things academically challenge you and do you enjoy? Which subjects are more appealing to you? What kind of a college experience are you interested in? Are you introverted, extroverted? A lot of the work that's done with the career and majors coaching involves assessments designed to help a student build their self-awareness. Because unfortunately, the education curriculum in America just ignores that. But it doesn't make any sense to make a six-figure purchase decision called college if you don't know why you're going. Which is why they don't even publish four-year graduation rates anymore. Because over 52% of kids take 6 years to get a four-year bachelor's degree because they're experimenting on mom and dad's nickel for the first 2 years trying to figure all this out. And yet we have the science to be able to say, oh, you're really good at this. Your interests lie here. You're likely to thrive on this career path. Taking the time, spending the time, effort, energy to really understand that probable career path and then back into the majors that support that are critical. It's also important to do that either at the end of the sophomore year of high school or before the junior year starts, because that junior year is critical in terms of GPA, test scores, focus on college, and choosing the right types of classes to prepare you for what you're wanting to do in college, where you're wanting to potentially go in college. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so many people are just guessing at it or they haven't thought about it. And we're just kind of unconsciously going through that process. And so any assistance that we can provide, any kind of framework, the thing I like most about a lot of the assessment tools that we use is it gives a teenager language with which to advocate for themselves, a framework that they can make decisions and advocate for themselves, as opposed to always looking to somebody else to help them make those decisions or making those decisions for them.
So am I hearing this correct, Beth? I kind of was thinking back when I was kind of around that stage of applying or looking at college. And I think really what I did is just fill out as many applications as I could and send them in and see which one is the best college, right? Or the most appropriate, whatever one I want to go to, and then choose them from there. Really what I think I hear you saying is you've got some tools to maybe go through and assess the skills of the student and then maybe match those up. Is that right?
It is. And let me tell you, I think the college purchase decision is the ultimate theory of relativity. What I mean by that is students need to be looking at schools that relative to their strengths and abilities is a good fit. So, we're a very brand driven consumer culture in America. So the brand name schools get mentioned all the time.
Yeah.
They may not be a great fit for that kid. Relative to the other students, how do I stack up? And the reason that that's important is because that's where we get discounts in costs. I can find a smart boy today lots of tuition discounts and more tuition discounts than a smart girl, because applications are running 60-40 girls to boys. And the admissions committee is trying to keep a 50-50 freshman class. So they're all fighting over the smart boys. So a boy with a 3.35 GPA may end up getting a better discount than a girl with a 3.75 GPA at certain schools. Well, how do I go find that? And is that a good fit for me? And do they have what I want to study? So yes, understanding the student, the size of school, the distance from home, should it be faith-based? Do they need to have a good sports program? What kind of experience is that student looking for? Now, some families, once they understand this framework, they're all over it. Others are like, you know what, I'm not going to overthink this. Okay. We have to meet them where they are. Just like some people go into a showroom at an auto dealership and they want to test drive everything, and other people look at it and go, nope, I know I want that. We all make purchase decisions differently, but because this is being driven by a teenager who has no sense of finance, we need to come along and give them a little bit more guidance. Because school selection turns out to be, in the 12 critical components, if somebody put a gun to my head and said, you got to pick one, the cake gets baked based on the list of schools they actually apply to. And we are not strategic about that. We need to curate a list of schools that have a higher probability of discounting the costs while providing a great fit for the student. So that takes some effort.
So Beth, what I'm hearing is we don't look at a college based on how good their football team is or how close they are to the beach. Okay.
It can be on the list, but it shouldn't be the driving criteria.
When you were, that's very eye-opening about the, regards to the boys or, that placement. And that reminded me, I don't know which book, but Malcolm Gladwell, I think it was Outliers, but he had talked about either some advantages of a student going to maybe not the Ivy League, but going to another school, still a great school, but you go in the Ivy League and everybody in there is brilliant. But absolutely. You go to maybe a non-Ivy League school, but the Ivy League, the kid's still brilliant, but they're around other brilliant students, right? And maybe they don't feel as brilliant, but you go to a different school, maybe you're going to be one of the top kids. And then you
and the money part of that, the money part of that is if you're in the top 25% of students typically admitted to that freshman class at that school, as defined by 3 criteria: unweighted GPA, standardized test scores, strength of high school curriculum. If you bubble up to the top 25%, you're going to earn some discounts if they have endowment dollars to share. Now, you're not going to see that as much at state universities, especially if you're an in-state resident. You will see that at the schools that have merit-based aid. It's a presidential scholarship. It's a chancellor's scholarship. It's a trustee grant. You will also see it at certain flagship state colleges that are trying to attract out-of-state students. So really understanding where you rank at those schools that, you're right, they may not be the Ivy League schools, but they may be in that next tier of selective, fantastic, great fit for you. And they roll out the red carpet and give you a discount. Why wouldn't we want to find a way not to overpay if we could? Even if you had enough money to pay for the schools that your
Yeah.
kids wanted to. Why would you pay full sticker price for a car if you didn't have to? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Nobody likes wasting money, and especially my wife. And so one of the things I think I've read in your book, it was, hey, this is essentially, right, if you get through this book, this is like a 25 to 50% coupon on college tuition moving
Truly.
forward. Yeah. And one of the things I was going to touch on is, as somebody's applying, right, as parents are applying or helping their kids apply to college, is how do you overcome that idea of figuring out how much somebody qualifies for? Because you could see a sticker price on a college that says, hey, it's going to be 40, 50, 60, 70,000 a year. And a lot of times maybe a parent's kid dismisses that. You know, is that part of what you guys are doing, is helping somebody kind of figure out exactly what the real cost may be after scholarships and those things?
Absolutely. So we approach it from two ways. Number one is helping them understand what the actual cost will be. The way that the Department of Education views that household from a financial aid perspective. So there are really three categories of financial aid, and your planning priorities should be dictated by which category you fall into. If you're a category 1 household, no matter what happens, financial aid optimization is your priority. That means your expected family contribution, or how the Department of Education arrives at a number saying this is your minimum out-of-pocket cost. If it's below the cost of attendance at a school, then you're probably eligible for some need-based aid. And so you want to make sure you pay attention to that and you earn as much financial aid as is available to you based on your circumstances. A category 2 household, which is the bell curve of American culture. This is where most parents that any financial advisor is going to work with, they make too much money to get a lot of help out of the need-based financial aid system, but not enough that this isn't going to hurt. You know, it's going to be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And so school selection is their number one priority, because they want to choose schools to apply to that have a history of discounting the cost to students like theirs. And then a category 3 household tends to be your highly compensated executives, your business owners. The need-based financial aid system wasn't made for them. So you really start to look to the income tax system for ways to create tax scholarships. How do we reposition income and assets in a way that allow the tax code to help offset some of the cost of college? And so you really have to understand, what is that number, that EFC, that expected family contribution. And the data points that go into that calculation are pretty straightforward. It's the income and assets of the parents, the income and assets of the student, the age of the oldest parent, the number of people in the household, and the number of people in college full-time. But it's amazing. I have yet to meet a family that says, gosh, when I put all of that stuff into the meat grinder called the FAFSA or the institutional formula with the CSS profile that's sponsored by the College Board, the number comes out and people are like, what? How do they think I can pay that much?
Yeah.
Nowhere do they ask, well, do you have any debt? What's your mortgage like? You know, are you on track for retirement? They don't care about that. And so oftentimes helping families understand the role that the financial aid system can and should play for them is also part of the process, because there's a lot of confusion about the kinds of loans, who can get them, who co-signs for them, who's on the hook, who isn't, when do we have to pay it back, what are the interest rates? It's confusing.
We have to pay those back?
Well,
Wait,
you know,
what?
they're debating that because they're talking a lot about loan forgiveness. So we'll see.
Absolutely. Sort of some of the asset repositioning stuff you had mentioned, end of sophomore year for the student. Now, I would imagine for the parent, is how long does that take? Could we be proactive and start looking sooner? Or what's your advice there?
Well, here's what I'd say. The formula is very unforgiving if the money is on the student's balance sheet. Income earned by the student is assessed at 50%. Assets owned by the student are assessed at 20% under current rules. Compare that to the way it's handled when it's on the parent's balance sheet. Assets are only assessed at 5.63%. And income is on a sliding scale. In fact, it's a progressive scale, much like our income tax code, but the rate goes up a lot higher. The highest rate is 47% in the FAFSA formula. So, the way things are structured on a balance sheet does make a difference. And that's based on the federal formula. There's another formula that's used by the College Board, a different set of forms, literally a different algebraic equation called the CSS profile. And they take into consideration things like home equity, non-qualified annuities. So there's some things that enter into the equation for the private schools that are excluded from the federal formula. So that's another little nuance that people don't think about. I have had people, and in this housing market where home equity is skyrocketed, it's like, how can you hold it against me that my house is appreciated? Because it's not like I'm really getting much more value. It's still got the same 4 bedrooms and 3.5 bathrooms. But we will work with families and help them understand, wow, you're going to show up in this equation for the private schools with a much higher out-of-pocket cost than you would for these schools that use the federal formula. And in some instances, maybe we'll just apply to schools that use the federal formula. So, there is no cookie cutter solution. I do think that there are some, tried and true principles that all families can use, but it truly is an individual Rubik's Cube for each family.
What came to mind there was oftentimes I've had conversations with clients that maybe are putting kids or juveniles on like an LLC that has real estate in it, right?
Yep.
To build credit and those types of things. What kind of impact does that have on financial aid?
Well, let's talk about that. Let's say that we're a W-2 wage earner household. We make a good living. We have a rental home that kicks off income, and we own that jointly. Well, you're going to get hammered in both formulas because that rental house is an asset, and the rental income is driving your income up. And so therefore, you're going to show up with a very high EFC. Now, what if we could own that real estate in an LLC? So now it's a small business with less than 100 employees, and it's literally not on the FAFSA. And let's make the kids income participants of that LLC. There's a provision of the tax code that says if a student can demonstrate half of their support, they can file a tax return independent of mom and dad. Turns out that during the college years, demonstrating half of support is really easy because every institution publishes a cost of attendance number. It's going to cost you $42,500 to attend this school. That's tuition, fees, room and board, miscellaneous. Got it. Well, half of 42.5, I'm just no brain damage here. It's going to be $26,000. Okay. How do I have a teenager, an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old going to college? How do they earn $26,000? Maybe they can do that through income producing real estate. So now I've taken that $26,000 out of mom and dad's tax bracket, put it in junior's tax bracket, real tax arbitrage. The other thing is you're phased out of education tax credits at about $180,000 of adjusted gross income. So maybe we pick up tax credits. So if I could pick up $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year in tax arbitrage over 4 years, that might be an entire year that you paid for or you put a dent in. So it's all kinds of little things that you have to look at to be smart. But at the end of the day, there is a cost. And then the question is, how are we going to pay for it? And what I've learned over time is the mantra should be finance their future, meaning the kids, fund yours, meaning your retirement. Borrow money on the cheap to pay for the kids to go to school, and take the cash flow you thought you were going to put in the 529, that you thought you were going to take after-tax dollars and put into college tuition bills, and put that on your balance sheet for your future. Don't hand the money over to the colleges, keep it on your balance sheet so you can take the grandkids on a Disney cruise. That's the name of the game.
You know, I love it, Beth. That was very interesting about moving that income over there. And I like the idea of finance theirs, fund yours.
Yeah.
Because I've seen so many parents that will do literally anything to
That
put their
emotional
kids
drive
through college. And I've seen them take out loans when
Yeah.
they have no retirement or they haven't funded theirs, but it's all about the kids. And what can happen, and probably will, you fast forward 30 years, the parents broke, and now we got to go back to our child and say, hey, can I live with you? Or can you pay my groceries?
You have hit it on the head. And I think the only reason that happens so often is because they can't see the opportunity cost associated with the decisions they're making to fund something much closer term versus much farther away. So the big challenge that we face is forecasting for them the likely outcome of the path that they're on, and contrasting that with doing it in a less conventional way. You know, the financial services industry has always said, oh, 529, that's the answer. And I'm not a fan of 529s because it creates a single purpose dollar.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
You know, I can only use it for education. If I use it for anything else, I'm taxed on the gains and I pay a penalty. I want multi-purpose dollars. What if Junior gets a scholarship? What if Junior would rather start a business? Am I really evaluating and spending $150,000 on an education and how to drink beer and smoke weed? Or should I go buy a franchise so that they've got a way to make a living in the future? I mean,
we're going to quote you on that.
Yeah.
That might be the clip that we put at the beginning of the podcast.
But I mean, and so often, because we are talking about the most precious thing to parents, and that's their children. I feel like our job is to kind of wake them up and say, okay, you're buying another house. Whether you knew that or not, if you're putting out $100,000 for each kid, $200,000 for each kid, you are buying another house. If I told you you were buying another house, now you'd be in your consumer mindset and you'd approach this very differently. But that's not how parents are wired to think about this.
So good.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you, I came up with another analogy. I used to always say that the college project plan was like a kitchen remodel, in that it took a team of experts to pull it off. The general contractor, big picture, budget, timeline, but they're not the one that does the plumbing. They're not the one that does the electricity. They don't put the granite countertop, but you got to have all those people at the right time in the project plan to create a beautiful kitchen. But then I started thinking, it's also a lot like painting, a room in your house. All the work that goes into painting, it isn't the painting, it's the prep.
That's why I don't like it.
Making sure we understand how the kid's hardwired, understanding the probable majors because we looked at career paths that played to their strengths, getting the grades, investing the time, energy, and effort in test prep so that I can put my best foot forward, because 3 extra points on the ACT or the equivalent in an SAT could translate to $8,000 of renewable scholarship money. making sure that from an admissions application perspective, we've done a great job. We've worked with somebody who's looked over our shoulder on that essay. I mean, it's a marketing. I've managed my balance sheet to put my best foot forward in the financial aid system. I understand that those low cost student loans that parents don't have to co-sign for are the best bargain from a financing perspective, and everybody qualifies if they fill out the forms. What role should that play? So, it's that kind of prep that is critical to a successful project plan.
Beth, I don't know. I feel like we could talk forever.
Yeah.
Let me just let me ask one question that popped up. Oftentimes, again, you had talked about we have these kids that are making these decisions, and a lot of times they have these brand name schools.
Absolutely.
I want to go here, but how can parents open up their eyes to kind of seeing other schools?
So to me, that is, like I said, the single most critical component in this whole thing. And what I've learned, having done this for almost 20 years now, is it can't be the parents.
Yeah.
It has to be the student working with somebody who's really good at this. Now, why is that? They have to own the choices on their list. You have to curate a strategic college list of schools where we know before we hit submit on the application that it's a good fit academically, socially, emotionally, and financially. It's a lot of work. But when you have a kiddo work with somebody, usually an independent education consultant, whose whole reason to be is let's find these schools that would be a good fit for you. Let's talk about the pros, the cons, the geography, the student body, the extracurriculars. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes research. But that time, effort, and research will deliver in spades because the kid owns the list. It wasn't put upon them. It wasn't suggested from the guidance counselor who got it from 3 years ago. It wasn't driven by their peer group. That's why this can't be done in 6 weeks. This really should start when they start their junior year of high school or the end of their sophomore year of high school.
Yeah. What I tell you, one thing I've seen is that our society now assumes everybody needs to go to college, and to be successful, you have to go to college. Personally, I don't agree. I don't agree with that, but I know that there's some kids, I've seen them myself, where either they're not ready for college at that time, or maybe, college is not going to be for them. And
you're dead on. And that's why the assessments are so important. You could find all this out. And the trades are crazy. They can't find enough people that are interested, right? I also believe right now we're really at the fork in the road with higher education, and you're going to start seeing it and hearing it a lot more because there are credential programs, there are certification programs that could allow kids that are like, no, I want to be a coder. I know I'm going to be in computers. Great. Go get a 2-year certification program and get out and make a 6-figure job. Are you kidding me? So I couldn't agree more. A traditional 4-year undergraduate college degree is not for everyone. We've kind of suggested that it is, only to find out that it isn't. But it takes me back to the fact that we need that kid to have self-awareness. So if we don't start there, we risk so much in this purchase decision. And imagine that's coming from somebody who has a financial bias. I am telling parents, this is where you should spend your money because it'll save you tens of thousands.
But I love it. And I've got one kind of final question, I think, here before we wrap it up. But we touched on this before we started recording. Can you share with us some of the upcoming changes that you're kind of anticipating in regards to qualification, FAFSA, and that stuff?
So the Department of Education recently signaled that they're going to make major changes to their formulas. They really wanted to implement it starting in 2023, but then they realized the antiquated systems that everything runs on, they couldn't get it ready in time. So they're telling us now it'll be implemented for the 2024 school year. Not everything has been finalized, but the preview of coming attractions is brutal for parents. Right now, if I have 2 kids in school at the same time, the expected family contribution calculation is split among the students. So you get some relief because you have 2 kids in school. That's going to go away.
Oh,
yeah.
That made total sense.
Absolutely. Common sense.
Yeah. I mean, and so I guess if I were to give you my 100,000-foot opinion of what I've seen advertised as coming, it looks to me like we're going to be telling everyone, have the grandparents save for the kids, because things are going to really work against you if you save on your own balance sheet. And if you have more than 1 kid in school at the same time. So we're kind of waiting for everything to settle into the final legislation and the way the rules are going to be. And then I'm going to do an updated version of the book to reflect the changes. And the thing I love about this country is every time they make these changes for the better, creative minds problem solve and come up with ways to plan around it, because it's rarely for the better. But I remember when I was reviewing it, I just thought, oh my gosh, I thought this couldn't get any worse. And so part of me thinks, okay, we just have to take back control of this purchase decision and decide, here's how much money I'm prepared as a parent to put toward launching my child and getting them on the path. And once we're clear on that, then we can go shopping. Because trying to say that we're going to seek solutions from this system, it's backwards. It's backwards.
Beth, let me ask you a couple more questions. One, this is a little off the wall. Have you Googled your name?
I have not done that in a long time.
Okay.
No.
Well, as we were prepping, like we always do for this, I Googled your name and I'm scrolling down there. One of the headlines said, "Did Beth sleep with Walker?" Now, that mean if you're a Yellowstone fan, you will know what I'm talking about. But
That's
I am
awesome.
Yellowstone. You know
I cannot. Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
I love Yellowstone.
Me too. Me too. And maybe the most important question, and Cameron, we don't have time to ask if you can use a 529. You can buy Paul Mitchell hair products with a 529 account, but can a high income family not pay retail for college?
Oh,
that's the question.
You know, I'm going to philosophically say to you, the reason that the gap between the haves and the have-nots continues to get wider and wider is because absolutely they have the opportunities to use the tax code and financing to their advantage. And I have, I'm blessed to have a lot of clients that start out saying, oh, we don't need to talk about the financial parts of this because I've got that covered. And I often say to them, oh, I'm sure you do. In fact, oftentimes with my families, I'm saying, you know what, if we had never met, you'd be able to pay for school and things would work out just fine. Things are good. But that's not why you invited me into your life. You invited me into your life to make it better. I've yet to meet a wealthy person, someone who's accumulated money in this culture, who will willingly overpay for something. So, let me just share some ideas that you just may not be aware of. And you can decide, make an informed decision on whether you want to go about it the way you had planned, or maybe a little more efficiently, cash flow efficient, tax efficient. It's, reducing the after-tax out-of-pocket cost by 25 to 50% is very achievable.
Beth, I appreciate you, and I appreciate the information you've shared today. This was awesome.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I'm sure that our listeners are going to have some follow-up questions. Where can they find you?
I have a website, centerforcollegesolutions.com. Sorry, it's such a long name. But yeah, and it's easy. There's lots of information there, easy to contact me from there. That's probably the best bet.
Okay.
Now, what about, I noticed you also have a little online course that I believe is free where they could learn more. Is that on that?
I have some YouTube videos and
Okay.
I do in the Learning Center.
Yeah.
Which you can access by going to my website. We have video tutorials that talk about these concepts, the right way to go about it. And that's super useful. And then of course, they can always buy the book on Amazon, Never Pay Retail for College. Easy to get a hold of me that way too.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll make sure that we put that contact information in the show notes so everybody can reach out to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you, Beth, and go make it a fantastic day.
Take care.